Written on the Edge, Season 7, Episode 42. I'm Vance Bastion here with my co-host, S.A. Baz Collins.
Howdy!
And we're really glad you're here with us. On today's show, Polis Loizou joins us to discuss his 3 books. He's got a new one out. He's also going to talk about some of his history, where he comes from, and the folklore behind it, which I'm really excited about. We are then going to review the new Interview with a Vampire with Michael G. Williams coming back to help us with that. And then Baz and I are going to share what's won our week. So stay tuned, like, subscribe, get the alerts for new episodes. But now, on to our guest. Polis is an award-winning writer and performer working across various disciplines. He draws on history, social politics, folklore, and queerness in all its forms. His debut novel, Disbanded Kingdom, was published in 2018 and longlisted for the Polari First Book Prize. His second novel, The Way It Breaks, is set in his motherland of Cyprus and is a good year, a historical novel inspired by local horror folklore. Polis is also one-third of the award-winning fringe theater troupe, the Off Broadway Company, as well as a performer of folk tales. He lives in Nottingham with his husband and cats. Polis, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, where did the fire start?
Before you get started, I just want to tell people, stay tuned for the end of the episode because you're going to see one hell of a blooper reel. Anyways, go ahead, Vance.
I also want to reiterate that Nottingham is a real place. I know some people have trouble believing it. They think that's...
Yeah, I was thinking I shot the sheriff before we got started, so yeah.
Yeah, there's actually still a sheriff. There's still a sheriff of Nottingham. It's, yeah. They don't have enough power to extract taxes from us, though, so it's fine.
Nice.
Yeah.
So all I was going to ask is, with all that storytelling behind you, where did the fire start to actually put it down and share it with people?
I mean, that's something that I've always done. Even as a kid, I was that annoying child who was writing a novel, at the age of 9 or whatever, that obviously it was a pamphlet or something. It wasn't a novel. And I used to have this like puppet theater, and if anybody came to the house or within any kind of radius of the house, I'd drag them in to put on the show of the puppet theater. So the storytelling's always kind of been there, or the need to do storytelling. And it might have been just because I was surrounded by storytellers, a lot of my family, a lot of just Cyprus generally. I think people like telling an anecdote and a yarn. And yeah, I think that just kind of came through, and that's something I've always wanted to indulge. So I can't really pinpoint a specific moment. It's just something that's always been there.
So I'm going to sort of switch the order a tiny bit, but tell us about the folklore of Cyprus. I mean, you just mentioned your hometown or your home island, so
yeah. It's a very rich history, Cyprus, and very culturally rich, because we're at the kind of meeting point of so many places. It's the Asian, European with the African influences. So yeah, there's a lot of, everybody's been through Cyprus and everybody's left their mark on Cyprus. But I mean, most famously, we're known for being the birthplace of Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty and desire. And we have loads of different, a lot of the Greek mythology, obviously, because we used to be a Greek island. And then with the influence of, the Ottoman Empire, we have other influences coming in. There's a folkloric figure called Garagiosis, who's comes from the Turkish, this kind of funny character who's, it's all shadow theater. Okay. And that's satire from the days of the Ottoman Empire, and that's a kind of something we still have. But the folkloric figures that I was most drawn to were what shaped my latest book, and they were the Galiganzari, that are these goblin creatures that come out from the depths of the earth during the 12 days of Christmas, just to make people's lives a misery.
During the Christmas holiday?
Yeah, that's how, and I love this weird balance that we kind of have in Cyprus, where it's a place where the pagan stuff and everything that predates Christianity kind of had to sit with Christianity once that took over, and we kind of made sure everything's melded together somehow. So yeah, they come up because the waters are unbaptized, and then, you know, when it's Epiphany, the waters are baptized again by the priests, and then that's when they go away, when the holy light of God shines.
That's awesome. I love
Yeah.
the merging of cultures like that.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And I don't know, I mean, these creatures, they would have come from who knows where. I mean, there must be ancient like versions of things that keep evolving. I suppose demons and things like that.
Mhm.
Cyprus, I recently discovered, was also where so there's this settlement, it's a Neolithic settlement called Hirogidia, and that was a place that you'd get taken to on school trips.
Hmm.
And nobody told us that it was also the place where archaeologists found the earliest beliefs in the undead. So
Really?
they found, yeah, they found a body in a grave with a big rock placed on its chest as though to keep it from coming back up.
Hmm.
And that's the sort of thing I think, I mean, that this is thousands of years old we're talking. So the fact that this is all happening on this island for so long, and stories are just things that keep evolving and keep, yeah, they're just, things become other things,
Sure.
and then they absorb other things. I'm very
No,
interested in that.
no wonder you became a storyteller. Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Cyprus has many, many stories.
Well, so let's talk about yours. Let's start with the Disbanded Kingdom,
Yeah.
which you actually didn't set in Cyprus. You set in London.
No, yeah, it's my only one so far that wasn't set in Cyprus, and it was the debut. Um, yeah, that one is set in London just because I think in many ways. So it's the story of a boy who's 22. Well, not a boy, but you know, not a not a boy, not yet a
Young man.
woman. You know, kind of
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
whatever. Paraphrasing Britney. It's, yeah, so he's just feckless and aimless. He doesn't know where he's going. His foster mother is, so he was passed around the foster care system, and then he was taken in eventually by this woman who's a wealthy novelist in West London. And he starts to have feelings for her agent, who might also be her lover. And yeah, so when I was writing my debut, I was thinking a lot about what people would want from me and what they'd expect of a debut novel. And I thought it had to be, you know, this zeitgeisty thing of, you know, the state of the nation and experiments in language and form and whatnot. So I'm proud of it in a few ways, and in a number of ways it does feel quite distant from me right now. I think it maybe was the novel I thought I should write rather than necessarily one I really wanted to write.
Hmm.
But yeah, it did mean, like, at the time, it definitely did mean something to me because it is basically about somebody having a breakdown in their 20s, and that's, I think we've all been there.
Hmm.
So it was something I was very much relating to at the time. But I guess, oh well, I don't think the breakdowns ever ended, to be fair. But especially as the political situation seems to get more and more exciting in the UK. So yeah,
All
that's
right.
that's one I have mixed feelings about, but yeah, I'm glad it's out there.
So, in the spectrum of feeling what you have to write versus what you want to write, where does The Way It Breaks fall?
That one was definitely wanted to write. I did. So that one I was initially going to set in the UK as well. But the idea of it came from reading this article when I was still living in Cyprus, about gigolos working the five-star hotels along the seafront in the town that I'm from, Limassol. And that just stayed with me for years and years and years. And I was going to set it in the UK, but then when I went back to Cyprus on holiday one year, I was like, why am I not setting it here? That's it definitely needs to be set in Cyprus. And the more when I realized that it should be set in Cyprus, that's when all the layers started coming to it, and it became so much more than just that story. So it became very much tied into the country and our history and our politics and our state of being, where we're essentially at the mercy of so many bigger factors than us. We're a tiny island that can not control its own destiny, really. And that was very much tied into the story. But I did try to make it accessible. And I thought naively, I was like, oh, this will be a way easier sell than my first book. This will be great. No, not at all. It was such a challenge getting anybody to look at it. And I thought it was interesting, but yeah, apparently not. So that one was very much the personal one that nobody wanted to read. But I'm proud of it. That's one that I'm glad is out there.
Well, you just have to take it as that it's ahead of its time. It will find its audience, and then you'll have your sweet revenge.
Yes, it'll be discovered in a Neolithic settlement 1,000 years from now.
All right,
pinning down a potential zombie.
That one's contemporary, right? It's not.
Yeah, it's set in. This is where I do this to myself, really. I decided to set it in like 2009-ish. Okay. There are reasons, but it's way too boring. But yeah, it's set at this time, particularly when Cyprus was kind of booming from joining the EU. Gotcha. And things were looking up, but then nobody knew what was around the corner.
And so did it follow a specific character? I mean, you had mentioned it was based on an article about gigolos in hotels, so I'm curious.
Yeah, well, it follows a young man named Orestes who's trying to better his life. He's sort of on the lower rungs of society for sure. And he ends up working at this 5-star hotel through a series of things that happen. And he starts to think his life is getting better, but then his paths cross with a man who is working as a gigolo, and then everything changes. But it does follow different characters as well, so structurally it might be a bit unexpected for a lot of people. I think my intention with it was, you think you know what this is and where it's going, just like Orestes, you're sort of lulled into the sense of, you know, what direction you're going on. But then you start seeing mechanisms of things that are beyond your control and things pulling you in different ways. So yeah, it starts to look beyond him, and even just more broadly at the country, at our history and everything. But yeah, looking through different characters' eyes as well.
Okay. And your most recent book then, A Good Year.
Yes.
You can hold up for us.
I can, because it's got this very, oh, can you see it now? Wait, there we go.
There you go.
There's this lovely cover designed by Sam Calder. I was thrilled when I saw that illustration. Yeah, this is about the Galiganzari, those goblin creatures that come up from hell. It's set over the 12 days of Christmas, and it follows this married couple, where very young and recently married, where Vespo, the wife, is heavily pregnant, and she does not want to give birth during this time, because there are so many tales about how your child might be deformed by the Galiganzari, or by being touched by the Galiganzari in some way, or they might even be stolen. And her husband Lugas, who finds himself drawn to an Englishman who has come to their village to sort of study their local, doing his whatever anthropological research on these villages. So yeah, it's got its various tensions.
I say, is he officially bisexual in the book? Does he not? Does it not really get
It
labeled?
doesn't really, yeah. So I do say that he feels for men what he should feel for women. You don't know what sexuality what his orientation really is, or even the Englishman, who is also married. But that was very deliberate because at the time people wouldn't have had the language they wouldn't have had these terms, or even this. Lugas might never have even heard that you could be bi, or that gay men weren't this aberration that you had to pray to God to,
When is it set?
Oh yes, of course, because it's set in the 1920s.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
important.
so it's the 20s in Cyprus, when Cyprus it became officially, or well, it was in the hands of the British and then became officially a British crown colony. And of course the Brits, like as with so many places, they didn't exactly leave us in a good state when they left. So they did cause a lot of damage, but that's all sort of hinted at in the book as well, all the stuff, the change that is happening and what is coming, and who the demons might be. But yeah, so in the 1920s, in a rural village in Cyprus, you would not have felt okay about having feelings for other men if you were a man.
Right.
That was definitely something that would have been abnormal, would have been a sin. And the British Empire definitely didn't help in that regard. So yeah, that's where that tension in that book comes from.
Very nice. And people can buy it everywhere, or is it just pre-orders currently?
Yeah, no, it is available.
Okay.
It is out, and it's ebook as well. But yeah, it should be available in the States and Canada as well.
Yep, I did find it.
N-
So
Now, hold on. The way that you deal with the folklore issue and stuff is it really is it only the inference of all this stuff that plays on the psychology of the characters, or are we actually confronted by the folklore itself in real, as in like magical or supernatural?
Well, what fascinates me, because I love folklore and I'm a folklore storyteller, like a live performer of folklore. I love how folklore has a grip on people, and I love
Mm-hmm.
what it does to a person and a society. And that's more what I'm interested in, is how true these things are to the people in the book. So it's never explicit. It's never, as Stephen King, like, there is definitely a monster. But for these people, or at least for their spot, these things are very real. But you have the book is drenched in local folklore. There are rituals, and there's all the stuff that has to do even with Christmas, the traditions that are tied into Christmas and the New Year. And you have to, because our Santa Claus, like, traditionally comes on New Year's Eve, and then you set the table for him, and then there's got to be certain things on the table, and it's all this stuff, and there's rituals to get rid of your fears. And so yeah, the book is very much alive with all that, and people
But it's more
thinking.
inferred and psychological
Yeah,
than
it's more
present.
psychological. Like, I do try to leave certain things, like, there's snakes found without their heads, which is what, the Galiganzari would eat the heads of snakes. And so you just kind of have all these little markers. But yeah, leaving it up to people's imaginations of what's actually going
Gotcha.
on. But I'm definitely more interested in the psychological effect of
Oh yeah,
fear.
it's great fodder. Yep.
Yeah.
And all I was going to say is, if folks want to support the publisher, fairlightbooks.co.uk if you're across the seas, .com if you're in the US. You can buy it directly from the publisher.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All
It
right.
might even just be fairlightbooks.co.uk. I think I have to check that.
Okay, I think I did find both. When I initially tried the
Okay.
co.uk over here, I got told I couldn't access it from this region. So
Oh wow. Okay. Well, that told you.
yeah, the internet's changing me again. So I'm gonna hop over to your theater side. Do you
Yes.
have any shows you want to share with us right now?
Well, there's one actually like tied to folklore that I'm about to perform again, and that's Mr. Fox. And that is inspired by, well, it's actually a retelling of a classic English folk tale that's many it's centuries old, I think, actually. It's very similar to Bluebeard and all these other tales of horrible men murdering women and keeping their bodies in towers. um, and it is about a very headstrong young woman called Lady Mary who wants to find out more about her enigmatic and charming fiance, Mr. Fox, but she finds out a bit more than she expected and ends up dealing with more than she bargained for. And it's quite a refreshing one because it is surprisingly very feminist, especially when you think when it was first told. It's
Right.
yeah, it's remarkable.
So if folks are local, where should they go to get tickets?
So I'm performing it in both London and Nottingham. In London, it's part of Grimfest at the Old Red Lion Theatre, and that'll be on the 24th and 25th of October. And in Nottingham, it's part of the Amplify Festival at Nottingham Playhouse, and that's on the 27th of October.
Nice.
But yeah, it's a fun show, and I play a really kind of unhinged narrator who who is possibly revealing a lot about himself in telling this story.
Nice. All right. So where is the best place for people to keep up with your updates, to find your show times?
I do have my website, which has the links to everything as well. That's just polisloizou.com. But you can find me on Twitter at Polis Loizou. That's probably where I'm most active. I'm on Instagram with Polis Takes Pics. Although now I'm starting the barrage of my Disney World trip and Florida generally. So yeah, expect a lot of that if you're going to find me on Instagram.
Nice.
That's coming as I sort through my 6,000 pictures that I took.
Oh my God. All right. Any final words of wisdom?
Oh, I don't have any wisdom. Just do what you want to do to the best of your ability without harming anybody.
Very nice. All right, folks, we'd like to extend a huge thank you to Polis Loizou for joining us today. Polis, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
Our pleasure. Well, we at Written on the Edge are proud to introduce you to new media by queer content creators. So if you enjoy learning about new artists, please like and subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Now, on to our review. Folks, our review today is not a reboot, but a rethinking of a classic vampire story.
Yeah.
Reimagining. Interview with a Vampire, the series on AMC. One, I'm going to tell you up front that I love it, and I'm going to probably gush just a little bit. But I would also like to point out that in 2016, Anne Rice was in on the rethinking of this. And I know there are a lot of purists out there who are saying, this is not what the book said. But you know what? She was okay with this because I don't think the publishers let her say what she wanted when she wrote the original book.
Right.
So
she had always envisioned it as a gay Gothic romance story. And
in her mind, vampires are pansexual because the bits don't matter when you're biting the neck.
Yeah. Funny thing that.
Right. So I am loving this series. I'm loving the fact that her son Christopher, who is a gay author also, is involved in the retelling, the reimagining. I love the fact that they're putting it under the umbrella of the Immortal Universe so that we can get some of her other works on screen and see them thought out for us. So overall, I'm enjoying this 100%. I know only 4 episodes are out. We're going to only talk about the first 3 today, but that's what we're doing. Yes, thoughts?
I will say, um, there were elements of the film that were well done. I mean, Neil Jordan,
Hmm.
does queer works. Did Crying Game, and so I mean, it's not like the director was not for the film was not going to portray that or fought against it. But if we all remember correctly, it was Mr. Cruz who had some issues with the whole thing. But and I want to kind of just add this to it. I mean, yes, Anne was involved in all of the changes and the reimagining of it, so it has her blessing. Christopher, who is her gay son, who is a novelist, who is going to protect his mother's estate like you can't imagine. He's not going to let somebody fuck with her worlds. As a novelist himself, he's going to protect that shit. So I'm down with whatever changes they make, because I know Christopher and her have had those conversations. So he will do his damnedest to make sure that his mother's vision still remains. So whatever changes they make, whatever things they want to play with, I am totally down with it, because it has Anne's blessing before she passed. So and I kind of like to imagine she's still hovering around. No.
I mean, if Anne Rice is going to have an afterlife, she's watching over it. So
yeah, exactly.
All right, and guest horror author Michael G. Williams, who's joined us for Horror Month. What are your thoughts?
Oh my God. If I loved it anymore, I think I would probably have to tell my husband that we were now a throuple with it, because I love it so much. Like, we both really love it. We both just, from the first minutes, were instantly sold on it. First of all, Anne Rice was heavily involved in preparing this rethinking of it. And I think the reimagining is exactly the right word for it, because it brings so much new creativity, new imagination to it. It's such a refined version of this story.
Yes.
And it upgrades the story in so many different ways. The queerness is explicit. New Orleans is not uniformly white.
Thank you.
Funny thing.
We were sitting there
and all the blacks weren't all prostitutes either,
Right. We were sitting there watching it, and one of the first things out of my mouth was, oh my God, it looks like people in New Orleans look.
Yes.
It's just so stunningly beautiful. I also think that it's a really great choice to go ahead and update it to be a little bit later, rather than like starting in the 18th century, just because partly they avoid some stuff that it's kind of hard to depict without in some ways celebrating, like the slavery era.
Right.
And but they still get to talk about the racial problems in the South, and they still get to talk about the racism that a character is experiencing,
and homosexuality too.
And and like those cultural concepts of what queerness is as we imagine it had been formed, so it's easier to depict that explicitly than if you stick with an 18th century character, they may not have a concept of that yet. So by making it a little later date, they're letting it be something that's more like a world that we can imagine ourselves a part of.
Right. And we're allowed to have the conversations that we know permeate and bubble underneath this whole thing. They're allowed to actually give voice to them and actually put them out there. One thing I will say that I was concerned about, and I know we're not really covering this portion fully because Michael didn't get a chance to join where Vance and I are on episode 3. I've gone on to episode 4. But the one character I was most concerned about was Claudia, because Claudia is a very problematic character in the books themselves, because in the books, she's like 5'6". She's not that old at all physically. And yet her mind evolves, so she becomes this really frustrated woman trapped in a literal child's body, which presents problems from a production standpoint. So when Kirsten Dunst played her, she was 11 when
Mhm.
she played her. And I remember all of the when she had to kiss Brad Pitt. You know,
Mhm.
there was a lot of discussion about that at the time. And then you go, so now we have the portrayal by, sorry, I should have had this up, by Bailey Bass, who is playing Claudia, and she's even older
Yeah.
in the series. But what I love about what they've done with her is that she has this, what I've termed a violent wonderment about her becoming a vampire. And I think I thought it was very clever. And I know we're not really delving into this part of it so much, but I thought it was really clever that they allowed Claudia to be older in appearance to kind of take away the factor from the maggots are going to complain no matter what we do anyways, but it takes away that element for them to bitch about. But at the same time, because of the way they are wanting to portray her, she has that child wonderment of, ooh, I can do this. I can do this too. Oh my God, and that kind of thing, I think, allows the child element of the character in the book to come forward in a way that doesn't detract, but it adds to the, you know what I mean? The dynamics are allowed to be played in that way. And I also like the way that they play with the modern portion in Dubai, and
I was
and
gonna say
then they go back to
we need to
America.
cover that a bit. So
Yeah.
if you are considering watching this but worried that it's gonna like be too different from the original, they actually cover or handle that super well.
Yeah.
Louis has invited Daniel Malloy, the young reporter who in the movie was played by Christian Slater, to come to Dubai and hear the story again. And they talk about the fact that the young Daniel Malloy had been on drugs, had been so desirous of achieving the condition himself that Louis had been still so twisted by Lestat that his remembering of things was covered by some fairy tale remembrance. So they delve into the why people tell lies, why the first version was inflated fiction in the characters'
Well, he
lives.
never released the book, did he?
He never, no, not in this
Yeah, it was
version.
never released. So he knew of it, but it wasn't out there.
Right. And so Louis still wants the story told, but now that we're getting this reimagining, he's telling it properly. And the older Daniel Malloy, who's at the end of his career, who's conquered his own drug issues, who's had family and lost, and ready to just sit and
Dealing with
listen,
Parkinson's.
and as well as have had some journalistic uh, awards and accolades, is going to tell the story, but he's also going to dig at the story, and he's forcing Louis to confront his own misplaced memories, and that's what's making this work for me.
Yeah, his examination of this vampiric world is much more pointed than I think it would have been had they had said he had done it 40 years ago,
Right.
where it was all the wonder of, because at the end he kind of wanted to be one. But in this one, and I don't know if it's because of his Parkinson's disease that is giving him the anger and the bitterness,
Mm-hmm.
but his character is much more driving. And I think Eric Bogosian plays him beautifully, because you get that element of both desire and envy at the same time playing as he's moving into this world and really starting to understand it. And I think I love the cat and mouse game between him and Louis.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, it's
Definitely,
desire and envy balanced against repulsion within the same character, and the actors bringing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that that one feels to be the predator and the other one the prey, but yet on other topics it's reversed.
Yes.
So it becomes this, even cat and mouse, it's like cat and mouse and cat, kind of, it just kind of keeps rotating, and they seem to be circling each other, and that's really driving it. What do you think, Michael?
Well, they each want something from the other, and they each hate the other. and I think that's a really powerful dynamic for two really fascinating characters. And they each look at the other and see a kid, which is a really important thing, because he looks at Louis and visually Louis looks like he's 30, and I feel like there is, for us, the viewer, an element of, Daniel is somebody who has had all these life experiences. He has learned so much about himself. He's like fucked up a million different ways. He's tells us a bunch of different ways that he's fucked up. And he looks at Louis and sees like a kid, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that for us visually, we see an older actor talking to a younger actor, and we sort of slip into that same mistake that I think that Daniel in some ways makes. But Louis, of course, looks at Daniel and sees a kid and just thinks like, you don't have the first clue about what the world is really about. And that is so fun, that like weird cognitive dissonance, that weird like frisson of the two of them each looking down on each other and
Mhm.
each admiring each other. It is so powerful. Also, this is random, but a part of it that really wowed me is that it acknowledges the pandemic and is set in the
Yes.
pandemic. It's
Yes.
the first new show in 3 years that I could see myself being in that world.
Yep.
Because like at a sci-fi convention over the summer, a bunch of other writers and I had a conversation about like how the pandemic had affected our writing. And like when we write an apocalypse or when we write something that's set contemporaneously, you know, something that's or contemporary, do we include it? And my answer was yes, because if I watch a TV show and it's just not a part of it, then I think, well, that's not a world that I live in anymore. And
Mhm.
there's like an immediate psychological distance.
Mhm.
But this includes it, you know, like
Mhm.
one of my writer friends on my panel said that she doesn't include it in her books because she's too worried that it would anchor it in time. And then like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, somebody might not be able to read it and identify with it. And maybe that's the case, but that if that's true, that works so beautifully in this and yet another weird little meta way
Mhm.
of it anchors this as a piece of sort of historical fiction
Right.
that is itself the wraparound story for a piece of historical fiction. So yeah, 50 years from now, when somebody watches this, they'll see something that is a time that is foreign to them, I hope.
Mhm.
And they are watching something that we experience as a story of a time that is foreign to us. I just think that there's something like really weird, something really clever psychologically in that, and
Mhm.
like turning this into something that we're both a part of and is also distant from us. I don't know.
I agree.
I,
And the
I
fact
have
that
a question. I have a question for you both, prediction wise. Where do you think Daniel's going to go in this? Do you think, because in the books he becomes a vampire and
Yeah.
he has his own met end later on? Do you think they're going to be? I'm wondering how much they're going to play with this. And I know Anne would have been part of these discussions with these characters like this, especially because Daniel is so focused here in the
Mhm.
beginning. But do you guys feel like he will get there eventually, or do you think they're never going to let him go there? Which do you think are the more interesting perspectives?
I think one, he's smart enough to learn Claudia's lesson, for she will forever be a young woman trapped in that body, though her mind and soul ages. I think he's not going to want to be an old man with palsy trapped in immortality.
Well, would he have the palsy? I think that would go away.
Would he? I don't know. We haven't seen enough vampires yet to know how the transition affects them in this new reimagining.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay.
I suspect that this Daniel would turn it down on the basis that he's gained too much wisdom / he doubts himself too much. Like
Mm.
he kind of is a disappointment to himself in a lot of ways. And I think that there's a part of this Daniel that would say, I'm not sure that I deserve it, you know. At the same time, they've given us a Daniel who has like it's established that he's in cognitive decline, he's in physical decline. His career is essentially over, you know, in a lot of ways. And the interview is the way to like revive and renew his professional
Make
life.
one last mark.
Yeah. And it's like it's also an opportunity for him to revisit this thing that he did very early in his career. And so in its own way, this interview is a form of immortality and he's willing to chase that. And it would be very human of any character to at the last minute say, okay, but what if this cures my Parkinson's?
Right.
So let's give it a shot. And if it doesn't work, I'll just wait for the next sunrise. You know?
True. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I thought he still might take that. He still might bite that apple.
Yeah. And it's also another opportunity for there to be an interesting two-way street between the two of them, of each of them saying to the other, kind of as an inverse of the scene between Armand and Louis, or yeah, Armand and Louis in the Louvre in the original, where Armand is like, I need you to lead me into the new world, you know. And this could be an interesting inverse of that, of Daniel and Louis saying to each other, I need to teach you how to recover from being a fuck up.
Given Louis having felt trapped with Lestat as his mentor, would Louis want to be trapped with Daniel as his student? He doesn't like him enough to spend immortality with him.
But that could change too. The turning could either amplify that or it could remedy it. You know, it's the red pill, blue pill kind of thing. You know, which one do you want to take and which path? I tend to think he will take it, because the opportunity is not only there for him to be healed, but I think the newfound power he would have would allow him to exact revenge on anything that he feels was foisted upon him in all of his fuck ups that have gone on. So I think there's an element to his character where he's bitter enough that that access to power probably would be somewhat intriguing for him.
I actually don't think Louis is going to offer it, now that I think about it, because Louis wants this book written to warn
He may
people
not, but
about...
Lestat might.
I know, and Lestat did it in the original, but Louis wants this book written to warn people about vampires. I don't think he wants to create more.
I don't know. I think part of it is Daniel's evolution into seeing more pluses and minuses as he goes further in. I think that's the rabbit hole. That's what is making this whole Louis and Daniel dynamic work, is because how far does Daniel go down the rabbit hole? And I think that's one of the things that's going to be interesting. I will say one element I loved, and I want your guys' opinion on this as well. What do you think about the duality of Lestat being so pansexual, so open, so blah, 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 blah for himself, but Louis?
Oh, yeah, no, the jealousy, rage, narcissism.
Yeah. I mean, it's, what do you guys think about how that's playing? Because in the movie, it was hinted at and kind of played with, but they were always two guys who were sharing a girl, you know, or something. You know, it was never to the level that we're talking about here. But now this is clearly a romance between two men and it's clear that Lestat chose Louis and continued to choose Louis. And it's Louis who has to get out from under that shadow to kind of be his own. But what do you guys think about the way that toxicity is playing and how it mirrors queer life? Because as queer men, we had to invent our own rules in relationships. What do you think about how that's working?
Michael, I'm gonna let you go first this time.
I think we've all had that shitty boyfriend who thinks that it's okay for him to do whatever he wants, but it's not okay for us. Yeah. And I think that partly, I think that's very common in queer relationships. And I think it's partly driven by that like very unfortunate combination that a lot of us, I still carry around to some degree, of like, no, I can do anything I want to. I am just proud as can be, except that also I have absolutely zero self-confidence. And so I need to make sure that I'm in control of the things around me as much as possible, because I've spent so much of my life feeling like I did not have any control or ability to predict what was going to happen around me, because I was so not a part of like the mainstream of what was happening around me. And so I think that we've, I think Lestat very aptly embodies that. I also kind of wonder sometimes what this book and the movies and the TV show also say about like, what was Anne Rice's dating life like? Like, you know, there's a lot of really not great relationship stuff in these books. And it's not that I'm saying that I think that she suffered or whatever. She clearly deeply loved her husband. But also like she has talked about how these characters were all part of her life, you know, and to some degree part of her. And so the fact that she was that aware of herself and aware of her experiences, especially at the age at which she was writing,
and those
this,
around her too,
and those around her, yeah,
because she you know, when she wrote it, she was living in San Francisco and she was surrounded by the queer community there, so she had all of that flowing around her all the time. So it lent itself for her writing this kind of a story. You know?
Yeah. I think that it embodies the way in which a lot of us feel like I need to be in charge in order to feel safe. And if I'm in charge, that means nobody else gets to be in charge.
What do you think, Vance?
Oh, I mentioned my comment earlier. His
Oh.
whole narcissistic toxicity, I'm on my way to becoming a god. Everything is mine. The rules are mine. You are mine. If I want that, that's mine. If I want her, she's mine. Mine,
Right.
mine, 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 mine. He's just a big dumb seagull, but he's beautiful.
This is the
That's gonna
Jonathan
be my new
Livingston
T-shirt. I'm
seagull
gonna
I
make a
needed.
vampire. I'm gonna make a vampire seagull. And I'm gonna
Mine,
let's not in the hindcore. There's nothing but a big dumb seagull. And then I'll put
Yes.
dash Vance Bastion.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Well, it's true though.
Yeah. All right.
Okay,
So
The big dumb seagull
final
and the
question.
whole world's a French fry.
Okay.
we do
Final
need to hurry to get
question.
down to the ratings.
Okay. Final question for you guys. If you were Daniel, would you take it? Would you take the offer? If Louis puts it out there, would you, as Daniel, in the situation he's under, would you take it?
Absolutely yes.
You know, we have a list of questions we've been asking authors this year, and the final one is, if you believe in an afterlife, what would you have waiting for you? And the fun part is, I've had several people ask me if I've been asked that question, but nobody's ever actually asked me. So if I believed in an afterlife, what I would want to have waiting for me is I want to be a ghost, a spirit, something that can just continue to watch the development of society and people. Would I take this offer? Yes, because it plays into what I want for my afterlife. I want to continue to watch the development of people and society.
I would
I like
definitely
it.
take it. I would definitely take it. But my only fear as a vampire would be, because fire does affect them. It can kill them. That's one of the ways they can go, at least in this universe. With the threat of nuclear war, I don't know. I'd be like, damn it, do I want to go out like that? So my fear would be I would be around to see humanity seriously fuck themselves. And I could be part of it.
I actually think every vampire ultimately becomes an activist if they intend to survive.
Right. So we're back at
Yeah.
True Blood.
No, I think that I would, especially if I were in Daniel's shoes.
Yeah.
Partly on that
Why-
thing.
why
Maybe
not
this
at
would-
that
Yeah,
point?
like why not? If
Mhm.
your body is already in decline and you're going to be trapped in it, you might as well gamble. I mean, like, to go into the queer themes, I knew plenty of people in the early 90s who were willing to try anything to treat HIV.
Mhm.
And it did not matter how bad those treatments fucked them up.
Right.
They were willing to give it a shot because it beat the certain knowledge of what was going to happen to them at the time.
Right.
And I think
Absolutely.
that he's in kind of the same situation. My grandmother died of Parkinson's. She had 6 months to live for 12 years, and like, I think that she would have been like, yeah, okay, let's do this,
Right.
like, I'll get you a vein. We'll make it happen.
Yeah, right.
And so no problem there. I especially Daniel in this iteration, because as Louis points out to him, despite him being, a cynical old curmudgeon, he, in the middle of a pandemic that he is clearly concerned about, got on an airplane and flew across the world. He's willing to take risks to find out what happens. He's willing to take risks to go back to the well on an interview that he did 50 years before.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to give it a shot.
All right. We need to move on to our ratings just for time reasons.
Yes.
Michael,
And
you're
I will
first.
say that even though this one ran a little long, I will put up the full review and discussion that we're having up on our Patreon. So it's a good reason to subscribe to our Patreon to help us keep the lights on. But Vance and I are working on to create new additional content out there for our patron subscribers. So definitely think about doing that. So what are your ratings, Vance?
Oh, I thought Michael was going first.
Oh, okay, Michael.
Sure. Production quality, 5. My God, it's gorgeous. I mean, like,
Mhm.
could it be more gorgeous? I don't even know if it could be more gorgeous. Script, screenplay, Also with production quality, they're doing a really great job of being very efficient. A lot of the spaces they shoot in are actually very small, but they do a lot to pack them with visuals. Script and screenplay, God, again, 5. I think this is just unbelievably well written. They have boiled this down and come up with a bunch of fun new creative ideas, and really, like, it is not just an adaptation, it is
And they hone to the
drastically
spirit.
an improvement. You know, I love the movie from the 90s. I loved the movie, and I think this is even better. Sound, lighting, score, again, gorgeous. I'm just going to point out this one little thing that I just made me instantly fall in love with it. The opening chords over the opening title card, it's the same chord as we hear a lot in the soundtrack to the movie. And then the music goes in a totally different direction. And it's a really fascinating way. Can you tell I was a band geek? But it's a really fascinating way to say, hey, let me connect to a memory you have that you won't even be conscious of, and then go in a different direction to demonstrate
Excellent
this
catch.
is something else. Art direction and costuming, it's just like, it's like the show itself is an incredibly plush velvet lined casket that I just want to fall into.
Not a pink satiny one?
It's like,
you'll see.
I don't know. It's so beautiful. And casting, a phenomenal job. I think that the casting of Louis is flawless. The casting of Daniel is unbelievably good. The casting of Lestat, I honestly never thought they would find a Lestat better than Tom Cruise, as crazy as that is to say. And this guy is so good. Just such a great Lestat. And directing, maybe it's the actors, maybe it's the director, maybe it's the combination. It's all a team effort when they make things like this. But the directing is really good. They're making a really good, they're doing a really good job of like building the beats of the story, and also like knowing when to pull out and when to zoom in and stuff like that. And I realize that's cinematography, but like the emotional tenor that they're getting out of these performances, so good. So 5. Queer themes presented, I mean, it can't be more explicit, and it's wonderful. And if they, I realize this isn't necessarily a queer theme, but they had to put this on TV, because if they had released it in a theater, I would have gotten arrested for public indecency. So the queerness is like, it's right there on the screen. It is hot as hell. Love it. And personal overall rating, I realize this is a scale of 1 to 5. So let's say like an 11, maybe a 14. I'm not sure. Something like that.
Okay. We'll let it happen.
Yeah.
And deserves it.
Yes. My numbers match yours completely for almost all the same reasons. A couple things I just want to add to follow up on your director and cinematography point. Even the establishing shots, the one that are supposed to be the big, beautiful shots, like when they're out in the bayou or something, they're only long as they need to be to establish the shot, and then something happens. No minute is wasted in any of the episodes I've watched thus far. On the queer themes presented, it's more than just the pansexuality of it. The fact that these 2 vampires have already on screen discussed an open relationship. Lestat broke the rules, but they discussed it. And they're about to be 2 men with a child. It's tapping into more queer themes than you would think up front.
Present day queer themes too.
Present day concepts too. Building a family and everything. I mean, just wow. So like you, mine were 5s across the board, except my personal overall rating, I'm going to one-up you and go 15.
There we go. Endorsed.
Mine are 5s across the board, with my personal overall being, because of vampires, infinity.
Yeah.
They got it, kids. The only downside to this whole discussion that I will put out there is that I was looking on IMDb, and we only get 7 episodes this season.
I know. But it's part of the immortal universe. There will be more.
Yes, Mayfair Witches is coming, so you know that's in January. So we're gonna have, and this is an entire universe, people. So things can happen.
And they've explicitly mentioned the Mayfair Witches already. Like they mentioned them right there in the first episode.
Yep.
And they just put out the trailer for Mayfair Witches. It's gonna be so good.
Yeah.
It is. It's gonna be phenomenal.
So here's the thing I will let you know. Go see it. Go watch it. If you have any ability whatsoever to watch vampires, do this but it is an AMC program, which means you have to pay for an AMC subscription. There are some
Or you
bundles.
can get it through. I think you can get it through Prime, can't you?
I don't know. I haven't looked.
If you do it through Prime, you have to subscribe to AMC.
Okay, but there are several bundles coming up for the holidays that will have AMC included. I've seen a couple advertised now, so watch for those. It's worth it. It's worth the subscription price.
Yeah,
100%. All right.
Bravo to AMC, by the way, because they did Outlander. They're doing this. They're also doing Mayfair Witches. Wonderful. I mean, kudos to you guys. Thank you for stepping up and doing the literary things and doing all of the good stuff out there that are just so sumptuous to fall into. It makes TV worth it again.
And the
God
bravery
knows
to
we
make
haven't had
changes.
Huh?
The bravery to make changes that deepen every part of the story rather than like overwriting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, Michael, thank you for coming back and joining us. We have one film left in Horror Month. It's probably not as horrific as you might imagine, but folks, next week, come back for Hocus Pocus 2.
Excellent.
Now,
because,
thanks for having
Bette
me.
Midler.
Oh, our pleasure. It was so much fun. I really hope you'll consider coming back and doing this again in the future.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Sweet. All right, folks, let's go talk about what Baz and I are doing this week. Awesome. So, what are you on about this week?
A couple of things. John Oliver, I just saw last night on Last Week Tonight, did a really, really great trans rights segment. It was brilliantly done. It was well thought out. And it's like, it's so sad in many respects. And I know the trans community feels this all automatically. I mean, it's just part of the deal, but it shouldn't be. But that we have to say these things out loud and say, no, I always go back to Morgan Freeman's statement. Transphobia or homophobia, he was using homophobia, but I'm going to paraphrase his because I'm sure he'd say the same thing. Phobia means scared. You're not scared. You're just being an asshole.
Yeah, I've stopped using that term. I've just called them haters.
Yeah.
They're just using whatever
they're bigots,
justification they can.
They're vile. Right, they're vile. In addition to that, and I don't know if you've seen this, but Jon Stewart, John Oliver's best buddy, did a amazing takedown of the Arkansas AG and their current efforts to dismantle trans rights. And they go so far as to actually prohibit the parents from any kind of access to trans care from a medical perspective. And Jon Stewart goes after the AG and just says, okay, so what you're saying is that you know more than the American Pediatric Society, the American Medical Association there. And he starts saying, he says, so you know more than them. Well, no, that's not what we're saying. We have, for every study that's out there that says that, we have one that's, and he said, really? Who? Cite it. Who? Well, I don't have them in front of me right now. He goes, so you don't know. You don't even know one? You just litigated this. You're the one who's writing that. You don't have one on the top of your head. You know, I mean, he would not let go. Mm-hmm. He was like a pit bull with that subject. And it was brilliant because all it said was, you're an asshole. A big, dirty motherfucking asshole. And I think both Johns, I would name them as honorariums of who won my week, but I am on about everything that they're doing because this issue is so important. And to put it, to paraphrase what John Oliver said last night, what do you care? They need to use the restroom. And he showed a segment where the teens were up in the school against the school board who were trying to put in this policy and said, I've shared it with trans teens. They're going to the bathroom. What are we on about here?
Right.
And when you have children And and I have to back up and let people know when I was, of that age, my early teens through my mid and late teens, I was out there doing that kind of thing, being an activist, going out and talk. So it was really wonderful to see our youth stepping up. But John Oliver makes a very valid point. Kids shouldn't have to be activists. They should be children. And for all the talk of protecting children, yeah, you're fucking up their childhood.
Right.
Let them be kids.
Yep.
So that's what I'm on about this week. What about you?
I'm actually enjoying watching people being held accountable. Like it's all coming up this week. Trump got called.
It's right in line with what I was saying.
I know. Trump got called to testify. He's not going to, but there are going to be repercussions this time if he doesn't.
Right.
And the man who drove an SUV into a Christmas parade in Waukesha, Wisconsin last year is on trial, and he's making an ass of himself. And speaking of Wisconsin folks making an ass of themselves, Ron Johnson's debate with Mandela Barnes.
My God. Oh my God. It was like one click away from the one with Herschel Walker. I mean, those two were just, I was like, oh my God, it's GOP on parade, these idiots.
Yeah. For those of you who didn't see it, it's actually worth finding because at one point, Johnson was called to the carpet for his involvement in the January stuff last year, and he tried to blame the FBI.
Yeah.
And the audience laughed at him.
Did not go well.
Epic. So I've been enjoying the fact that it's taken for freaking ever, but people are finally being held accountable for their actions.
Now we just have to see if Wisconsinites will pay attention and Georgians will pay attention,
right?
And
I know.
Do the right thing.
I know. We're not
we
done.
Get the democracy we vote for.
So, who won your week?
So who won my week this week was actually should have been my winner last week, but I totally spaced it, pulled an old fart kind of brain flatulence and did not have up who I actually wanted to be who won my week. So I'm making her my who won the week this week. And it is NASA astronaut and Marine colonel. That totally blew my mind when I read that in the whole thing. Nicole Aunapu Mann. She is the first Native American woman in space. She is also the commander of the mission. And so it's really nice to see First Nations represented out there, and especially a woman, so other Native women can see how high they can go if they want to apply themselves and they have the opportunities available to them to get there. I also read that she is from Petaluma, California, so San Francisco Bay Area native. So kudos all around to Nicole, man. Doing the work, girl. Get out there, do your stuff.
Nice.
What about you?
My nephew. He turned 13. He's amazing. He planned his own birthday party. Admittedly, he got grandma and grandpa to fund it, but he did all the planning. He got everyone together. He made sure everyone was safe. He made sure there was distance for those who were still worried about COVID. For 13, that's impressive.
Okay, is he a young Sheldon in the making?
No, I mean, he's always been very meticulous about things. He
that's kind of like young Sheldon.
A little bit, but he's not over the
anal
edge
about
OCD. Like, he's not going to use dish soap on a chicken breast that hits the floor.
Yeah, right.
He's not there. But he's a great kid, and congratulations, boy. You made it to 13. You are now a teenager.
Yeah. Now the real fun begins. Well, kudos to you. I'm glad. That's a fun thing. You know, my granddaughter just starting to step over the line into real adulthood. I'm like, that doesn't make me feel old. I was there for the actual birth, literally the day she was born. I'm like, yeah.
All right.
Well,
Well,
cool.
any final words of wisdom?
Make popcorn. Watch more GOPers, the maggots burn.
And more importantly, if you meet them in public, just hand them a shovel and let them dig their own holes, because they do.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what my husband told me. That's one of the things I learned from my husband was, be quiet, give them rope, they will hang themselves.
All right, folks, Written on the Edge is produced by Rogue Ravens Media. For our disclaimers, links to social media, our listen station, or to sign up as a guest, visit www.rotepodcast.com. If you enjoy learning about new artists like Polis Loizou, or catching up with old artists like Michael G. Williams, subscribe so you get the alerts for new episodes. Follow our YouTube, help us grow that channel, and tune in next week for your queer media fix.
Bye, merch.
And that.
Bye-bye.
Oh, what's that? Closing time. The bums rush in melody, dear.